So we're now ready to go to the following iteration number 6. And this is the beginning of part 2, and focus on the second screen. We're going to start by working through the navigation process, how we can go from one screen to the next and back, and then data transfer, how can we move data from one screen to the other and the issues associated with that. And then the third is how we can build the functionalities on the second screen that relate to the first screen. So let's go ahead and apply the app development process, iteration 6. Navigate to second screen. And we start with the problem formulation and the scope. User navigate from the first screen to the next and back. Remember, we have to come back to that main screen because we have a main screen and we're able to go from one to the other. Testing scenarios. We have one scenario, user move from, or user clicks or swipe, whatever it is, initiates action to move to second screen. The app displays the second screen. And then the scenario 2 is coming back on the second screen. The user returns or initiates a return, and the app returns to the main screen. Alright, so solution formulation. We have first the model, and the model represents the data and how they are represented here. There is no data. All the work is going to happen on the storyboard, so no change in the model. 6.2 to the view. A lot of work will happen on the view. So to navigate from one screen to the other, you need to have a mean for the user to initiate the navigation and to return from the navigation. Navigating from one screen to the other, as you probably think, happens almost in every single app that you use. So to facilitate the transition from one to the other, iOS introduces a class called UINavigationController. The UINavigationController is a hidden class. It's like the view controller. You don't see it, but it manages the transition from one to the screen to the other and allow you to have an event or a process to move between them. So it gives you a lot of features related to that navigation. So we will need to add an instance of UINavigationController to manage the navigation. All right. Now, the UINavigationController also give you a toolbar, and so we'll need to add a bar button item to initiate the transition from the main screen to the second. Then the third part, the type of transition. There are several types of transitions that are managed by something called UI Storyboard Segue. The UI Storyboard Segue, creating a segue or an instance of the UI Storyboard Segue to manage the actual, or to represent the actual transition. So all of this we're going to do on the view, and then on the controller, no change on the controller. Actually, there will be one change for something on the screen I didn't add here. We need to add a second screen. We need to add a second screen, add in a UI navigation controller, and use the UI segue, and we'll see that. So we're adding a second screen. On the controller, we need add a second controller, a second or a custom controller for the second screen. No other changes. So step number 3, solution for implementation. First thing we're gonna need to do is to add a second screen. Actually, it doesn't matter. Maybe we'll first step wrap the first controller. And you probably haven't done this before, so you would not know what we gonna do. So I'm gonna just try to erase my memory and say add navigation controller. And I'll show you how to do that. And one of the readings included that. Add navigation controller, add second screen, add a custom controller class, and connect it to the second screen. Then add a bar button item on the main screen, and then connect the main screen to the second screen using a show segue, and you'll see that this stuff is new to you. So let's jump into action so you can see it working. So we'll bring in our everything back, switch to the storyboard. You make this a little bit bigger. All right. So the first thing is the navigation controller, and you can see it here, a navigation controller. So that navigation controller manages the hierarchy, so I can add it from here, but I'll show you an easier one. In the Xcode menu, which is not showing in my video, there's something called editor. So click the editor in the Xcode menu, and in the editor there is an option called embed in, and then there is a navigation control. So this option will allow you will make Xcode embeds this controller, the main screen, inside a navigation controller, and you don't have to worry about making any connections like you do if you're gonna use this navigation controller option. So add that. So here is the navigation controller. So it is grayed out because the navigation controller is invisible. The user is not going to see it. You have the arrow that represented the very first screen, and that arrow now points to the navigation controller. So when you launch the app, it's not the main screen that's going to launch. The navigation controller will launch, but you're not going to see it. It's invisible. And the navigation controller has already made it a connection between itself and the main screen, and that connection is called root view controller connection. And you'll see here that the screen is now connected as a root view controller, meaning that's the first controller in the navigation. So think of the navigation controller like a stack, and the first blade on that stack is that main screen. So that's that connection that got added in here. Comes with it the menu, the navigation menu that was added, and which will allow us to add a button to navigate. But before we do that, let's add a second screen. So the screen is the view controller. So if you add a view controller, it comes with already the controller as well as the white area, which is the view inside it. So we added that second screen, so that represents the second screen. And if I minimize the view, you can see them, all three of them now lining up. So we need to add a custom class, because this first screen, if I switch to the identity inspector, the first screen is managed by the custom class viewController.swift. That second screen I added is managed by the default controller UI view controller, but I'm going to make some work on it. So I want to add another viewController.swift and attach it to that second screen so that the second screen become also managed by a custom controller, not by the default. So to add a second Swift class, there's a plus at the lower left corner of the navigation, the project navigation area. If you click on that, you can add a new file. You can also go to File in the Xcode menu and select New, or you can right-click in the project navigation area and say New File. From the New File menu, we'll choose iOS, and then you have several options. I want to create a source file. Coca Touch is the Apple framework, so we'll create a Coca Touch class, and then click Next, and then we give it a name. So I'm going to call it Color View Controller, or maybe this will be the paint, so I'm going to call it Paint View Controller, depending on what you're going to do. So Paint View Controller. Subclass of is very important. A subclass of says what is the base that this class will be created on. Since we're going to use this as a custom controller to a view controller, then it has to be a subclass of the view controller, which is the base controller. The language is Swift, and then next, where you want to save it. So you can save it in the main folder, or we can save it in the subfolder and put it in the subgroup, and then create. So I have here the Paint View Controller Swift. Here it is. And then back to the storyboard, I can then select the second screen, and in the identity inspector, select that Paint View Controller as my custom controller of that screen. So now if you move here, it shows the name of the custom controller. So I added the navigation, I added the second screen, everything is working, but you probably noticed that this second screen is currently orphan. What do we mean by that? It means that it is unreachable. You cannot reach that. The navigation controller is the first, because here is the arrow that tells us this is the first. And there's a connection from the navigation controller to the main screen, so we know that the navigation controller will bring about that main screen. But the second screen, there's nothing that connects to it, so we need a connection. To create a connection, we need to ask ourselves, what should the user do on the main screen that will trigger the navigation to the second screen? One of the easiest things to do is to add a bar button item. Here it is, bar button item. If you drag that bar button item, you'll see that there is a placeholder for it on the top right or the top left. So you can put it anywhere you want. So I'm going to put it on the top right. And in the attribute inspector, there are some system items. So there are some items that you can choose which give you some commonly used buttons with common designs so that there's consistency among all the apps. If what you want to do is one of those, you can use it. If not, then you can have your own custom title or custom image. So I'm going to add a custom title here, paint. Or you can add an image. You can add an image. You will have to add the image to the project first and then add it. So here is my button, and if I click on that button and press Control, I can drag from that button and initiate a segue to the second screen. And here are the available segue. We're going to use the first one, which is the show segue. And there are several, as you can see, and you can even make your own custom, but with the segue, the first one is easier. And the reason it is easier is because it gives you back a back button. You're not going to see it here, but when we run the app, you'll see a back button. So notice once we connected, a menu bar has been added. This is the work of the navigation controller. So let's test and make sure that we can navigate back and forth from the first screen to the other. First screen should show without any change except to that navigation bar. The navigation controller is invisible, so we're not going to see it. And then when we click on paint, we should be able to go to the second screen and back. Nothing else should change, so we should still be able to run all the tests, create all the colors, see all the numbers, and everything that we had before. So here is our splash screen. Then it's going to switch to the navigation controller, but it's invisible. So you see your screen as it was, and it works the same way as it did before. The only way you're going to sense something is different is finding that bar button, bar item, and then the bar button item that's added to it here for paint. If you click on that, you navigate to the second screen, and you see here the back button. This is added by the show segue. So that's what's so nice about the show segue. It gives you that automatic back so you can return. In project 5, we're going to use modal segue, which doesn't give you the return, and you have to create your own custom return, and we'll see how we can do that in module 5. So here is the navigation. We can go from one to the other, and we create the data and everything like that. So we're now ready to take that color that we created and move it from the first to the second. And we'll do that in the next video, but I want to kind of put the seed of why this is a problem. Every module in iOS is an isolated island. Think of it as an isolated island. If there's something on an isolated island and you want to transport it to another island, you're going to have a mean of transportation. So same thing here. So we have that screen, and there's data on the main screen. There's like a red value, a blue value, a green value, an alpha value, all combined there's a color. So that color exists and is visible in memory only to that screen. You may say, but both of them are part of one app. It is true, they are part of one app, but each component is isolated. Similarly, when we had the navigation, the screen, with the controller. So this screen had connected to this controller, and even though it's the controller attached to the screen, the actual memory of each of those items are not accessible unless I make a connection. So likewise, the second screen does not see the data of the first screen unless we make a connection between the data. We created a segue which can help us through that, and we're going to use the segue. There's another method which is using a third party, a shared object, shared memory that all of the screens can access. So from the first screen, we can put the data in that shared object, and then from the second screen, we can retrieve it. But we'll do that in module 3 using that shared object. Here, we're going to use the segue and transmit the full color object that was created from the first screen to the second screen, and we'll do that in the next iteration and the next video. Let's push the changes we made. We'll say completed iteration 6, displaying implementing navigation from one screen to the next, to the second. I only have 2. We're going to be only working with 2 screens until project 5, where we're going to work with 3 screens. But you can add more than that if you would like.